All right, we're still a little late on people, but I am going to start. Remember, today and tomorrow, we're going to start our voyage, so to speak, into JavaScript. Friday will be lab the entire period. I won't go for, basically 3 hours and 50 minutes today on this. It's just too much to comprehend, but we'll talk about it for a while. I'll try to give you at least an hour today and an hour tomorrow where you can continue to work if you're behind on homework, or if you're still working on the wedding site or whatever. All right, I sent you this. I actually sent you 2 emails, one yesterday and one today. The one yesterday, as it says, these are. Okay, it should have been these are. But when you type JavaScript into Google, you get 1.8 billion with a B hits. All right, so I picked out some of the ones that I thought might help you the most, especially the first 3 that are in here. So I want to show these to you. All right, W3 Schools, and you've heard me say this before, is always just, a really great resource. W3 Schools has an HTML5 tutorial. W3 Schools has a CSS tutorial. And as you can see here, W3 Schools has a JavaScript tutorial. So especially when we're first starting like this, if something doesn't make sense, this is often a good first place to go. Tons of code examples. All right. Second, if you go out to developer.mozilla.org, that kind of is the place for everything JavaScript. And it may not look like it right here, but they've got so much stuff on this site. There's tutorials, there's guides, there's all sorts of different stuff. All right. So again, another good place to go, developer.mozilla.org, and look for their JavaScript stuff. Now, years ago, okay, meaning about 2 or 3 years ago, there was a site called hunlock.com. And that was my #1 site, HUNLOCK.com. That was my #1 site for everything JavaScript. Unfortunately, they took the site down, but they archived it. So this is the archive. So you'll notice that if I go in here, it's really an ugly site. That's it. But they have in here Essential JavaScript, a JavaScript tutorial, working with numbers, working with strings, working with arrays, working with functions, working with JSON, which is JavaScript object notation, working with dates, and even a little thing on AJAX, which is asynchronous JavaScript and XML. Again, that might be the best site. Okay, I mean, if you start on there and you start going through the JavaScript tutorial, that's a great place to get started. All right, and like I said, it's not a pretty site at all, but it's a very well done site. All right, the book that we're going to use is called JavaScript 6th edition. It's the Web Warriors series. And it looks, maybe you've seen it already, maybe you haven't, I don't know. Hopefully you've got a copy of it. All right, but it looks like this. All right, like the picture that you see on the phone right there. Okay, and sometimes people go through that book, and I heard people last year say, because we used the same book last year, I don't really like this book. I don't like the way it's written, I don't like the examples. So there are a lot of free books that are online. One of the ones, it's not a bad book at all, and you've got a URL to this also. It's called Eloquent JavaScript. Now, it's written as though you have at least somewhat of a programming background. So you might find it, if you don't have any programming experience, a little harder to work with. But it's a very, very good book. All right. There's a thing called codeschool.com, which you may or may not have heard of. And it's an online way for you to learn different things. And one of the things that you can learn in here is JavaScript. And they have a free bunch of lessons that you can go through to learn. All right. Next, it's a thing called Crockford.com. Douglas Crockford is kind of one of the innovators of the JavaScript programming language. He wrote this book right here that, even though it's about 5 to 7 years old. It's still considered pretty much the #1 book on JavaScript. So why didn't you use it for this class, Jeff? Because again, it's an O'Reilly text, and O'Reilly texts are pretty much geared towards people who are already programmers. All right, they're fairly technical, but it's a good book. He's got all sorts of things. The reason I brought this up, if you look on here, you'll notice that everything that's on here, including YouTube's everything, these are all hyperlinks. All right, so you can take a look at your leisure and see if there's anything that you're interested in there. This I found online, and I gave you a URL to it also. Coding with JavaScript for Dummies. All right, again, I'm not trying to infer that any of you are dummies, but it's just another book if you're interested in it. The Dummies series assumes that you have no experience in whatever it is they're trying to teach you. And there's even a beginning programming for dummies, and I gave you that too. So you've got a whole bunch of stuff to get started. That's the JavaScript stuff that I put in here. Then I gave you a couple of other things, so I'm going to give you those also. Close this. Yeah, stay there. And this, again, if you're interested, I've hawked this site at you before. It's called Udemy.com, UDEMY.com. All right, I've gone in there and I searched for JavaScript. And when you search for JavaScript, they have hundreds of courses, but they also have about 50 that are free. So again, if you don't feel like you're getting the adequate knowledge, it's another place that you can go. You've got the URL to that if you're interested. All right. I don't know if the people who are in here in this room right now, if you know what GitHub is, if you've ever used GitHub, all right, except if you have a GitHub account. In many ways, it's a code repository, and it's a bunch of other things that you can do also. I would suggest that you go out to GitHub, and there's basically an intro type of page out there that you can take a look at, and you might want to do that. All right, notice, learn GitHub, read the guide. All right, the reason I'm telling you that is if you decide that you want to use one of these packages that are here that's called JSBin now, if you want to log in, you've got to log in through GitHub. You need a GitHub account. I didn't know that until this morning because I got into JSBin and all of a sudden it asked for my login. And you'll notice too, I'm trying to log in and I keep clicking it and nothing happens. And I'm not sure why, because I did go in through GitHub and change my credentials, but it doesn't like that. But if you want to know more about JSBin, I also, you can just Google it, which is what I did on YouTube. All right. There's another package that's in here that's called CodePen.io. All right. And notice what it does here. It's got 3 windows. So I can type in my whatever HTML I want in here, whatever CSS I want in here, whatever JavaScript I want in here, and this is actually the first program we're going to do in a couple minutes. All right. And I can do all that stuff and then basically run it. Okay. If you want a little bit more, I'll leave that up. On CodePen, I YouTubed it. There's a CodePen for beginners. It's 25 minutes long. And again, when people say to me, well, I don't have time to look at that, then don't. All right? There's also, many years ago, I used a book, and the author of the book that I used wrote this package that was called JavaScript Runner. And basically, it's a simple interface. You can put JavaScript in there, just JavaScript. So in other words, I can put in here function add to num1, num2. And don't worry if you don't know what any of this means. It's okay. Var sum equals num1 plus num2. Alert, the sum of and I click run and nothing happens. Well, then why'd you show us this tool? Because you have to call the function. So I want to call add2 here, and let's just grab three numbers, 54 and 67. All right. Now, when I click run, notice what it does. It runs my code. So if you want to put in just JavaScript, and you've got the URL to this also, you can use JS Runner. All right. There's also a thing that's called Jsfiddle that you can use. And literally, I just Googled Jsfiddle, and I grabbed one of the examples. I wouldn't expect you to understand what this means. And don't worry if you don't. But notice if I click, it just comes up and it says hi. Why does it say hi? Because that's what we told it to do right here. So in other words, if I want to change that to Hello World, which is kind of the classic. All right. Well, there's a, gotta run it. And there's Hello World. All right. So there's a lot of different packages and stuff that you can use, all right, if you're interested in taking a look at this stuff. Again, if you're not, you're not. All right. And finally, in this handout, I put a thing in there on Chrome Developer Tools, which you may or may not have ever heard of. All right. But if I bring up, and I may have even shown you something like this, if I bring up a web page like this, and I hit the F12 key, all right, what it does down here is it shows me everything that's involved in making up that page. But if I go over to console right here and click on console, I can start typing in JavaScript commands. All right, so you'll see this. So if I type in alert, hello, hit enter, I get my alert. All right, you're going to see a lot of this stuff as we get going in here. But Chrome Developer Tools can be a great way for you to go in and actually start to debug your JavaScript pages. And I'm not going to go through these, but I've got 4 different tutorials that are out there if you want to learn more about Chrome Developer Tools. All right. So that was just to get us started a little bit. And I don't need this. Yeah, I can leave. Take attendance, well, as at least as of right now, we don't have Jesse. Maybe he'll be coming later. I don't know. All right, so that's done. Just real quickly, these are the ones. Chrome Dev Tools, Discover Dev Tools, Introduction to Chrome Developer Tools Part 1, and how to use Dev Tools for the absolute beginner, which always is a pretty good place to start. All right, and there are free courses on Dev Tools also from Udemy and from other places. All right, the other thing that I wanted to tell you is if I come out here and the one email that you did get from me, that's great. The one email that you did get from me today that I want you to open right now is this one. All right. It says JavaScript, JS, and HTML.html starter files for class with today's date on it. Take that. Please save the zip file and save it to your desktop or wherever you normally save these things. Then go in and extract that. In other words, unzip the file. And I'll give you a minute or so to do that, and then we're going to start up. We're going to learn how to code in JavaScript we're going to code right now in JavaScript. You may understand very little of what we're doing, but that's okay. I'd rather do that and give you a bunch of examples today and a bunch of examples tomorrow, and then start on the book on Monday. Because that way you will have seen it in action. I've said this before, you learn by doing much more than you learn by seeing PowerPoints or a textbook on a screen or whatever. So somewhere in my mess, I already have this. this is 01 JavaScript payroll.zip. Well, I thought I had it in here. That's fine. According to that, I do. There it is. Extract all, extract. There it is. All right, so this is what you have in here. Oh, I guess I gave you more than I thought I did, but that's still fine. These are the files that we care about right here. Okay? These files. What I put in there for that, that was just an archive of it, so don't worry about that. I shouldn't have even included that, but it's okay. Just so you see this, if you don't look up on the screen here, the 6 files or 7 files that you see right here, these are all, other than the one that says, they're all identical to one another, except they say 00, 01, 02, 03, 04, 05, and 06. Other than that, other than the numbers that are right there, these 6 files are totally identical to one another. All right? Okay. So, why did I do that? Did I have to do that? First of all, no. But this way, doing it that way, when we create each one of these right here, we're not going to have to worry, all right, when we do this, we're not going to have to worry about going back into that file, changing the number, hey, why didn't this work type of an idea, all right? So when we get to that point, what you're going to do is you're going to have this file, this is the one we'll start with, you'll have this up here, and you'll just be able to do a run, launch in Chrome. That's the whole interface. I didn't put any CSS in it, I just threw a button in there, okay? So why did I do that? Well, if you look on here, what we're telling it is when we click that button, we want to run a function called main, which we haven't written yet. We're going to write that function called main in just a minute as a class. All right? So you'll notice that you also have in here something called payroll iteration 00.js. Please open up both test00.html and payroll00.js. Please open both of those up in your editor of choice, be it Notepad++ or be it brackets or something else, whatever you happen to be using. So again, I already went through this file with you, so I don't feel the need to do that again. So I'm going to jump right here. And the first thing for you to notice, I put a boatload of comments, and I've copied these comments to every one of those 6 files or 7 files that you have. All right? So we're going to build this incrementally as a payroll program. The first one, it's going to be 5 or 6 lines of code, maybe a little more than that. But when we do it, it's not going to, it's like, wow, that really didn't show me very much. But we're going to add to it every time. Hopefully that makes some sense to you. All right? Okay, so notice this is version 0 of a simple payroll program written in JavaScript. The program will be refined and added to in future iterations. That's in every single example that we have. This thing right here, just so you hear the terminology, this thing right here, this is referred to as either an IPO chart, IPO, or a hypo chart. The IP and O in both of them stand for input, processing, output. Sometimes it's called a hypo chart, meaning that it's hierarchical, input, processing, output, okay? If you've never heard it in a nutshell, all right, what you do when you're writing any kind of program is you're taking inputs, you're processing them into outputs. I mean, that's more or less, that's what we're going to be doing for the rest of this semester. That's what we're going to be doing the entire next semester. All right? So if you look, we're going to have 4 inputs: a first name, a last name, an hours worked, and an hourly rate. Those are our 4 inputs. All right? We're also going to output, I don't know how I lost first name there, but I'm going to put it back in. We don't have to, but we'll output the first name. We'll again output the last name. We'll again output the hours worked. We'll again output the hourly rate, and we'll output the gross pay. So we're going to input these 4 things: first name, last name, hours worked, and hourly rate. We're going to output 5 things. 4 of them we already have: the first name, the last name, the hours worked, and the hourly rate. Well, the other one we're going to put in there is gross pay. And you all know this. What's gross pay? It's hours worked times hourly rate, right? That's what it is. For this one, we're not going to worry about overtime. We're not going to do much of anything. We're just going to go and key this stuff in. That's about all we're doing. All right? So again, this is the IPO chart. Then underneath that, I've got something that's literally referred to as pseudocode. P-S-E-U-D-O-C-O-D-E. Pseudo meaning false, meaning it's not real code. Pseudocode is meant to be a cross between English and actual programming language. So the idea is, if you write something like this in pseudocode, you can take it and put it into any programming language. It won't matter, or any programming language you know. So what are we going to do here? We're going to declare 2 strings. We're going to declare 2 variables that in each one of those we're giving an initial value to. Then we're going to declare another variable and give it a value of 0 to start with. Then we're going to say that value equals hours worked times hourly rate. Then we're going to display all. Now, I'm not saying, hey, does that make sense? Maybe it doesn't. But that's exactly what we're going to do right now. So you'll notice we have, again, 4 inputs: first name, last name, hours worked, and hourly rate. You can put your own first name in there, your own last name. You can put your own hours in there. You can put your own hourly rate in there. All right? So you should be down here. All right? And I'm down here where it says variable declarations. So I'm going to declare those variables right now. Let me hit enter a few times. Move that back up. Here we go. So I'm going to say var first name equals Jeff. Var last name equals Scott. Var hours worked equal 40. Var hourly rate equal 25. Var gross pay equals 0. Then gross pay equals hours worked times hourly rate. And I'm going to have an alert in here that's going to say hours worked. Let's take it from the top. First name. Now, this may be wrong. I'm going to have to check this. I don't remember if it's \n here or a BR. I always forget for some goofy reason. So let me very quickly, we're not done yet, but I'm gonna stop after I put this in just to make sure that the \n is correct. So let me save this. That's not the one I want to run. That's the one I want to run. Okay, it is that. So you can see this will be our output, first name Jeff, last name Scott, good. All right, so I'm going to put that in there, and I'm just going to keep adding to this. This one's going to look a little different. We're going to go over all this in just a minute. Let me first double check and make sure that I wrote it correctly and didn't screw anything up. All right, so I'm going to go back to my file here, do a run the program. See, something in there is wrong. When I click run and nothing happens, there is a mistake. So let's see if we can figure out what the mistake is. First name, last name, hours worked, hourly rate, gross pay, that looks good. First name, last name, hours worked, hourly rate, gross pay. Might be this, that might be a little t, I don't remember. Let's try it again. That was it. All right. So I'm going to give you a second to key this in, and then we'll go back and we'll take a look at the entire program, okay? So that's everything right there. Hopefully that's big enough that everybody can see it okay. This is a case-sensitive language. I had a big T there. That's why it didn't work. And again, we can pretty this up as much as we want to, need to do so. Has everybody had a chance to key it in? Is there anybody that it doesn't work and you don't have any idea why? All right. We're going to go later and look at this in developer tools. But what I want to do is I want to explain everything. Okay. First of all, there's nothing magical about the word main. It's just the name of the routine that I wrote. Now, in some programming languages, next semester you're going to learn how to write C# code. And you're going to learn to write it in two ways. You're going to learn to write it from a console, which means from a command line, basically from a DOS-looking interface, and you will learn how to write it using a GUI, or a graphical user interface. When you write it from a command line, you have to write a function called main. Main is typically referred to as a program driver. In the fourth semester, You take a class in Java, not JavaScript, but Java. In there, when you are writing a Java application, you must have a function named main. That's why I named mine main. Main is known as a driver. I may have given you this analogy before, but a driver is like a conductor for a band or for an orchestra. Most conductors for orchestras don't play an instrument. Rather, they have the baton. They tell people to come in at a certain time. They delegate authority. Would you agree with that? They're like a supervisor. That's what main is doing here. Now, in this case right here, main's doing all the work. Everything we're doing inside of main. By the time we get done with this, we'll be writing separate routines to do everything. All right, just so you know that. So, couple things. JavaScript is an unbelievably forgiving programming language. Did you hear that? It's unbelievably forgiving. It's always suggested that you put the word var before you create variables. But if you leave the word var off, it still works. JavaScript recommends that at the end of each executable line of code, you put a semicolon. But if you forget to do that, 99 times out of 100, it still works. So it's very, very forgiving. It's, not to be funny, but it's more forgiving than I am. I want you to write it the right way and follow the syntax as you're supposed to do it. In most other programming languages, not all, but most, they require a semicolon on the end, and if you don't put it in, you'll get an error, what's called a syntax error. That's an error in the language, the rules of the language. But if I took off every one of these semicolons and ran it, it would still work just fine. Yes?
Mine's not working.
Okay. Well, let me go through this and then come over and take a look. All right? So, you'll notice here we have 5 variables. Make sense to everybody? We have 5 variables. JavaScript has very few different variable types. 2 of them are shown here. They are string, which is basically text, and number. JavaScript handles all numbers pretty much the same way. Okay? Now, I could have come in here if I wanted to and put in 40.00, 0.00, and 0.00. That would have been fine to do it. You don't have to, but it would have been fine to do it. Also, in JavaScript, not all programming languages, but if you look up on the screen, in JavaScript, you can also come in and instead of using double quotes, you can use single quotes. But you have to use 2 double quotes or 2 single quotes. You can't mix them. Does that make sense? Yes.
So is it also optional to define what type of number or thing it is, like in C#?
No, in other languages, you'd have to put, like, for example, here you'd have to say float or double, or if we didn't have these in here, you'd say int. JavaScript doesn't recognize those. It just has a type that's called number. And it encompasses basically all types of numbers. All right? You don't say a variable type. JavaScript is what's known as a loosely typed programming language. Okay? And just so you see this, I think everybody here would agree that hours worked is 40, hourly rate is 25, and gross pay is 0. Correct? Right here? If I came in after I did this, and I changed this, and I said hours worked equal hello, hourly, I don't want you to do this, rate equals goodbye. All right, if I did that, I've changed what's in those in that data there. Then I came back here and I ran it again. It still works. You can change the type of data that you put into a variable in JavaScript. That's because it's loosely typed. The language that you learn next semester, C# is strongly typed. If something's a number, it's always got to be a number. It can't hold anything non-numeric. This can. Now, you don't typically do this, but the point is, you can. All right? So, we have declared right here, if I just say var first name, if that's all I say there, so if I put in var first name and I put in a semicolon, and then I comment out the rest of the line, all right? Then right now, this thing does not have a value. Literally, its value is what's called undefined. All right, I'm going to save this, and I'm going to run the program again. See how it's undefined? And literally, when you have a variable like this, which is undefined, what that means is it's been declared because that's the variable declaration, but you haven't given it an initial value. So by putting it in the way we had it to begin with, where it looked like this, all right, this is known as both a variable declaration and a variable initialization, okay? So I can declare a variable and initialize it on the same line. I can also do this if I want to. I don't know why I would, but I could do this. And put the declaration on one line and the initialization on another line. Does that make sense? You can do that. And again, you might say, well, why would you ever want to do that? Well, maybe I want to ask the person what their name is. All right, you're going to learn how to do that before the end of the class too. All right, now this, I don't know if you've ever heard of this before, but what we're looking at right now, in many ways, for many of you, if you've never done any programming before, I don't know if you've ever heard of this term before, but what we are doing right now is what's called a paradigm shift. And what a paradigm shift is it's a shift in the way that you think. And that's what you're doing right now. You know, it's called JavaScript, but it's the JavaScript programming language. You're learning a new language. All right? And I don't know if any of you in here have ever learned a foreign language, but if you have, you know, a lot of times at the beginning, it seems really weird. All right? I remember being a junior in high school and taking beginning Spanish. All right? And you couldn't say the pencil. It had to be el or la, because everything in Spanish is either masculine or feminine. Where we just say the, they say el if it's a masculine thing, and la if it's a feminine thing. And I thought, that's just really stupid. But then the rationale that was explained to me was, well, by doing it that way, you can tell with the thing that you're alluding to if it's a male thing or a female thing. All right? I'm not saying I thought that was good or bad, but that's just the way that it was. You may or may not be aware of this, but other than German and Latin, English is considered one of the hardest languages in the world to learn. All right? You've all learned it as far as I can tell. I've heard speech come out of every one of your mouths. All right? So I think you've all learned it, but you're learning a new programming language now. This programming language has about 50 or 60 keywords that have a special meaning. But the thing to realize is anytime you're working with a programming language like this, think about 50 or 60 words. That is about the vocabulary of about between a 12-month and an 18-month-old child. All right? So, you know, it's like if I'm working with a let's say an 18-month-old child, and I want them to do something, and I tell them to do it, and they don't do it. Yelling at them isn't going to make them understand it. Just like hitting your keyboard real hard isn't going to make it work. All right? So what we're doing in here is we're having a shift in the way we think. All right? About, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I was very disenchanted at the school I was working at. So one summer I just decided to apply for every single IT job, teaching job that I could find. And I drove all over the place. I was in 3 different states. All right? And I applied for 9 jobs. I got offered 8 of them. The one I didn't get offered, and this, I'm going to tell you, this might be why. All right? Because my thing was on paradigm shifts. So what I did, I thought it was funny or cool, but they thought it was just sucky. I could just tell by their look. Is I literally did a little sleight of hand, and I made 2 dimes go from and shift from one side of the screen to the other. And I said that was a paradigm shift. I thought it was kind of funny. They didn't. All right. I mean, and the interview basically went downhill after that. I looked after I did it. I showed it. You know, I looked around. And they were all like, you know, whatever. You know. So It's pronounced like 2 dimes, but it's P-A-R-A-D-I-G-M. So we come in here and we declare and initialize 5 variables. No one asked this, but if you look up on the screen here, you might say, couldn't I have just done this? Couldn't I have just done that? The answer is yes, you could have done that too. All right? So rather than giving it an initial value of 0, all right, I could have given it that value. Just to prove that to you, I'm going to save that, come back, run it again. Of course, yeah, make me a liar. But it still works. All right? Let's go back because I want to make sure it works. But I want to show you a few more things about this. All right? Okay. All right. Like I said, when we get done with all of this, we're going to go over it in just a couple minutes. All right. So we are declaring 5 variables there. And we are initializing 5 variables. Then we are changing the value of one of those variables. Does what I'm saying here, does all that make sense? You'll notice in here, I've got 2 kinds of comments. If you look up on the screen, if I start a comment with a slash, a forward slash followed by an asterisk, then I end it with an asterisk followed by a forward slash. That's for a multi-line comment. So I can make that as big as I want to make it. If I put 2 forward slashes in, that takes the rest of the line to the right of the 2 forward slashes and makes that a comment. Comments basically they're just disregarded by the system. It doesn't look at your comments. All right? So we come in here and now we're telling it to multiply this by this, which gives us 1,000. And then down here we're telling it to print it out. So this says first name followed by a blank space. And I want to concatenate or glue together with that the first name. So I want it to say first name Jeff. Okay? When you want to concatenate or glue something together like this, you use a plus sign. I don't expect you to remember this, but I'm just showing it to you now. All right? Somebody tell me, what do you think is going to happen if I do this? I mean, that's pretty stupid, right? Because I'm about to multiply hello by 25, which is pretty dumb. All right? But I'm going to do it anyway. That's never stopped me before. And it still doesn't like something that's in there. That's not what the problem is. But what I wanted to show you is what's going to happen when I do this is it's going to say that the result is this. Anybody want to guess what that stands for? That's an A. What? Not a number. So when JavaScript is expecting that you're going to give it a numeric value and you don't, it puts NaN into whatever you tried to put that value into, not a number. And the key thing to remember about that is it's a big N, a little a, and a big N. Because there's a function that you can check to see if you put a number into something, and it's called is, NaN, for is not a number. All right, we're going to look at that a little bit later. So this is just printing all of the information out, and you'll notice I told it to take the gross pay and just make it 2 decimal places. Now, it's going to work fine the way that it is, but if for some reason we'd come in here and said the hours worked was, let's say, 43.875. I don't know why you'd say that. And let's say the hourly rate is 25.1234. If you did that and multiplied those 2 by one another, you'd get a value that would be 6 or 7 decimal places. This is saying I only want it to be to 2 decimal places. Okay? So again, hopefully, other than Christopher, we're going to look at his in just a second, you were all able to put this in, all right, and it came back and it said your first name, your last name, the hours worked, the hourly rate, and your gross pay. Am I right in assuming that it worked for everybody else? All right, then we'll take a look at them. Now, I got to tell you, I got to walk out for about 30 seconds, or I got to give my wife a call at 9 o'clock in 5 minutes. And there's the reason for that is she got some work done on her car, and she's been a good customer at this place, and they're rewarding her with 2 months free Sirius radio, all right, for her being a good customer. But they want to be able to send a signal, and for some reason they've got my information in there, so I've got to click a button at 9 o'clock with her being in her car to send a signal to her radio, all right, which is unbelievably stupid, all right, but it's the way that it is, all right. Now, I'm wondering what I changed in mine, because my guess is mine's still not going to work. You saw that it did. That looks okay, that looks okay, that's okay, that's okay, that's okay.
Semicolon in first name.
What's that?
Semicolon at fourth first name.
Yeah, that would do it. All right. So let's see, thank you, if it runs now. That would be it. All right. So I will leave that up here. I'm going to stop taping right now, but